Diễn giả ngay phía sau đây sẽ chia sẻ về chính chủ đề liên quan đến AI. Xin được trân trọng kính mời toàn thể quý vị, chúng ta sẽ cùng đến với phần chia sẻ với chủ đề là đón đầu AI của tương lai. Và người mà sẽ gửi đến quý vị phần chia sẻ này xin được giới thiệu ông Steve Shirkey, là kiến trúc sư trưởng của Amazon Web Service. Và sau đây xin được mời ông Steve lên sân khấu. Now I would like to introduce Mr. Steve Shirkey, Principal Solution Architect at Amazon Web Services. Please welcome.
Thank you. Xin chào. How close was I with that? Hi, my name is Steve Shirkey. I'm a solutions architect with Amazon Web Services. The focus of this presentation, you've heard a lot about AI, you've heard about the exciting things that FVT and other companies are doing around AI, the promise of a smart city in the future. I also want to focus us on what you can achieve today. What are the things that you can actually deliver on today? And these are some of the highlights of what customers are doing on AWS today. And you can see a little bit about their story in terms of how they're using the platform today. So let's look at what's been basically taking off in industry, different use cases that are being adopted by AWS. You can start with, obviously, computer vision. We have image recognition happening and tagging of photos, so automated tagging to be able to describe what's inside a photo. Object detection tracking, you've seen demos out there about the single shot detector, the fact that you can identify in a single scene all the different entities that are inside it. So we see a lot of use of that. Speech recognition, automated speech recognition, as well as natural language understanding. The two parts come together, as you saw earlier with the FPT product, that you can actually speak Vietnamese into that, and it understands and takes that and translates it into text. From that point, it can then search against a database to identify what it is that the user's intention is. Algorithmic trading, obviously, this has been happening for decades on Wall Street. To be able to identify patterns and trends and try to predict where will a stock price end. And sentiment analysis, huge part of your customer 360 and identifying what's happening and how does your customer feel about your product, right? And obviously, you can only do so much to that manually, and using AI, leveraging AI and ML, it's been a great use case, significant use case. So let's look at some customers that are currently on AWS and using machine learning on there. First, with GE Healthcare. They do a lot of diagnostic data, and they collect a lot of scans and computer images. Those images then are identified for tumors, any kind of anomalies. So radiologists basically would be uploading this data to the internet. They have that accessible, and the machine learning is being performed on top of that data as part of the GE Health Cloud. Next, we look at NHS, and that's National Health Service out of the UK. They basically have a lot of cost involved with servicing the customer via call center. So you can imagine if you can automate that, and they have using our Lex product, which allows them to automate the call processing, and they've actually saved 40% of their calls offloading onto automated fashion. So Moody's has an analytics platform that they built on AWS. And one key component of that is the machine learning to be able to identify and scan documents, much more advanced than a typical OCR use case. So they've been using machine learning on AWS in order to achieve that. So NFL, I don't know how many football fans there are in here. I'm sure there's a few. So National Football League in the US, they chose AWS as their platform for their advanced analytics and also machine learning. So what happens is during a particular play, they can identify where is the predicted path for a receiver, where are they going. So they use RFID embedded inside their equipment in order to detect their movement on the field. So they're using AWS, they've selected AWS as their partner in doing that. And F1, which has basically been responsible for a lot of exciting road races. And in a given race, each car has 150 different sensors, and every second it's collecting enough data, it becomes gigabytes of data at the end, and they're able to stream that data real time back using our Kinesis platform and capture that data. So the story is, you take an existing product, right? If you go to watch a race, if you go to watch a football game, there's a certain level of expectation, but what they're trying to do is add capability, add new experience for their audience so that users can be more connected. So maybe they could be viewing stats on an iPad. So, sorry. So if we look at the overall customer stories, there's so many fascinating stories. I've been limited to 30 minutes, so I can't go into detail about all of them. But we have tens of thousands of customers today running on AWS, running machine learning in production, which is by far the most in production in the public cloud. And there's so many fascinating stories from Pinterest with the visual search. If you guys are using Pinterest, you capture an item, you say you want to search for that image, that's actually happening on AWS. They build it with machine learning on top of AWS. FINRA, which monitors security transactions in the US, they monitor more than 50 billion transactions every day from New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, all of the major exchanges, and they try to monitor for any anomaly or fraud to identify is there some collusion happening in the market. So they've used AWS successfully. They're all in on AWS. So what is another story here about AI and ML? We can tell our own story. As Amazon, we were working with this since 1997. This is what used to be known as a web page. Nobody would recognize it today as a web page. They would think it was something else because it's all just text. But you have this personal notification service. This was something that was developed so that when people purchase books, that it would be recommended that you would be interested in another book. So this has happened in 1997, and it's continued forward since then, more than 20 years. Now, the kind of use cases that we've used machine learning for at Amazon include a lot of things. So, of course, anyone who's ever used the Amazon.com website knows about recommendations and personalization. So the idea is items that are similar to ones that you're looking at, items that other people like you have purchased. All of this information starts to give you a recommendation against millions of products. It's impossible for us to know all the different products. So this surfacing of recommendations is a key part of machine learning for AWS. Second, fulfillment and automation. So you have robotics. So you imagine you have a very large fulfillment center. You're storing all this product. So we use Amazon Robotics to lift the actual racks that contain the product and bring it to the pickers, rather than the picker moving through the entire factory and trying to optimize that. The machine learning part is how do all these robots work inside of a single environment so that they're not disrupting each other. So using machine learning at the edge and being able to deal with the sensor data that comes to the robotics is one of the key parts of machine learning. Drone is the exact same story. So we have our Prime Air we launched as a pilot project in the UK. So the idea was to deliver products, these are big, heavy products, to deliver those products directly to the customer. That's that last mile that takes a lot of money and time to deliver. So we wanted to try to automate that piece. Drones, of course, have to deal with a lot of different factors, from weather to obstruction and any other cases, to identify a best path to get to the end point. So, of course, that's automated using machine learning. Voice-driven interactions. How many people have heard of the Alexa? How many people have heard of an Alexa? All right, either we have a lot of people who don't want to lift their arms, or yeah, I think there's quite a few people who are familiar with this. So the idea was that was an entirely new category. Today we take it for granted, but previously that was an entirely new category of product, to have a voice device, an appliance sitting in your house that had natural language understanding. And also our Amazon Go store, which is a completely new retail concept. So we looked at the store with the experience of shopping in a brick and mortar store and tried to identify what were the things that we could make better about it based on our experience. So one of those things was, can we get rid of the cashier? Can we get rid of the person who's actually collecting the money and counting the goods? And that's what we've achieved with Amazon Go. So the idea is that it's an automated process using sensor data to be able to predict and identify what were the items that the user collected throughout their shopping, and then charge them after they've left the store. Used to be called shoplifting. Anyway, so we have the ML mission. That's Amazon. I'm from Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services is focused on providing tools to customers like yourself. We have more than 125 different services. And one of the key aspects for machine learning is we identified one big problem. Can you guess what the one big problem is with machine learning? It's data scientists. They don't exist, right? It's hard to find. It's hard to retain talent. So our goal is to democratize AI, to deliver those tools as much as possible to people who are just developers. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what you could do today, whether you're a data scientist or just a developer, or maybe you're just starting out and you've done a hello world code. But the idea is that there's actually a lot of solutions that you can implement today using AI and ML on AWS. So if we look at the whole story of AWS, we have essentially 3 different layers. And I'm going to walk through each one of those. So let's start with the very lowest layer. This is intended for people who really like to roll up their sleeves, really like to get into the guts of it. They want to set up their own operating system. They want to tweak every driver. They want to do all of that themselves. And that's the level that they want to get to. So this is essentially running virtual servers, and they can spin up a deep learning AMI, which would give them access to all the most recent open source frameworks for doing machine learning today. So this is for a data scientist who really wants to get into the guts of it. And of course, as you see, we support everything because we believe today it's still day one. We believe that the choices and the options that are currently hot will change over time. And we think that today, obviously, you have a preponderance of TensorFlow. You have people use Caffe2 for image recognition or computer vision. You have other people using PyTorch for simplicity. So we believe that eventually what will happen is that it will continue to change. It will continue to evolve, just like everything. And so we look at trying to build a platform that will support everything. So below that is the infrastructure. So we have the latest NVIDIA processors, the latest GPU processors that you can spin up and use, and you're not paying for that on a long-term basis. You pay as you go. So the idea is if you have an experiment that you want to try out, maybe it's the first time you've ever tried running PyTorch, you can go ahead and spin up an instance, run it with a pure, very fast, 1 petaflop of capabilities, operational capability. You can do that today, and you pay only per second with a minimum of 1 minute. So the idea is that power, that ability for you to just spin that up on your own, you don't have to call us and say, hey, can I do that? You just simply go into the console, and you can spin that up today and use that. So beyond that, we start looking at a different level. If we think about the typical process for machine learning, we actually think about it as 3 different steps. So we have the initial part is about building. You're essentially identifying the data sets, you're trying to do the pre-processing on that data, and now you're getting it ready, and then you're actually starting to do the training process. So you actually have chosen an algorithm, you've chosen hyperparameters, and you're actually doing your training, and then you often will have to repeat these experiments using different hyperparameters. If you're as old as me, you remember your television used to have aerial antennas. Imagine you have to continue to try to experiment till you get the best result by changing the angle and the dimensions of this. So that's just 2 aerials, but in real machine learning terms, you often have many different things that you're trying to fiddle, many different knobs you're trying to tune. So tuning is a big part of machine learning. It's manual, often in this manual process, and you're repeating yourself again and again. And finally, let's say you come out with a great machine learning model. It's doing what you want it to do. It's achieving the results that you wish. You now have to deploy it. Deploying into production is no easy task. Anyone in this room who's deployed a production application that's required 7 by 24 will know what I'm saying when I say it's never a trivial task to deploy. So that's a typical workflow for a machine learning process, to build it, to train it, to deploy it. So we tried to come up with a tool that could help assist with that process, knowing that that's a very typical process for all data scientists. And so we've developed Amazon SageMaker. So SageMaker is intended to do those 3 different aspects. First, it provides you with the ability to spin up a Jupyter notebook. Those in the room who have done data scientists will know what I'm talking about, but let's suffice to say that it's just a console in which you can explore your data. The second thing that it provides you is many first-party algorithms among the very common algorithms that you would typically need to use. So things like k-means, k-nearest neighbor, PSA. All of these algorithms, up to 14 different algorithms, are provided for you out of the box. You don't have to understand machine learning. You just have to simply understand what that algorithm does, give it the input data, get the output data, tell it where it's going to go, and you can actually start spinning up training jobs right now using first-party algorithms from SageMaker. But let's say it's not those 14 algorithms you want to do, and this is where you say, I need to do this in a different way. That's also supported as well. You can bring your own model, you can actually bring your own framework, and you can develop using SageMaker as an automation to create that pipeline. So bear in mind that there's a lot of flexibility inside this framework to assist with the fact that we know in the future things will change. And when we get to the training and tuning part, so we actually have just one-click training. So as mentioned, you select an algorithm, you select an input data set, you tell it where you want to put the output to, and you can run that and have it automatically deliver the model for you. You can walk away and have a coffee. Now what's really nice is we offer hyperparameter optimization or hyperparameter tuning inside the console. So the idea is that those things I was mentioning earlier about how you have to change the settings trying to get the best result, you actually can automate that by putting machine learning on top of machine learning to try to optimize those parameters. So this is offered to you as part of SageMaker, that it can automatically test many different options, many different settings, until it comes up with the best scenario. So not only can you go get a coffee, but you can actually go off and take a weekend off because the machines are working in the background to try to come up with the best results. And finally, at the deployment part. So it's one-click deployment. Just as before, I just tell it the model, and I tell it the capacity of the machine that's going to be running the model, and then it actually will handle any auto-scaling, it'll handle any harnessing of that model, and it provides me complete logging, it gives me capabilities like A/B testing. So for a machine learning expert today, a data scientist, you may be skeptical. I really do recommend that you look at what SageMaker can provide, because you may find 80% of what you're doing is undifferentiated heavy lifting, and that is not what you want to spend your time on. So all these options are available inside of SageMaker, and it's all wrapped by the typical AWS tools for end-to-end encryption. You pay as you go, as I mentioned earlier. You have support for private connection to this, and it has compliance and audit capabilities. So if we look at customers for SageMaker, customers who said, I know how to do machine learning, but that's not enough. I want it to be easier. That's a company like Intuit. And you can see Intuit's chief data officer had nothing but praise for the fact that Amazon SageMaker was the only way they're going to be developing and deploying their models in the future. These are other customers that are using SageMaker today. And so you see a number of different household names, Dow Jones for financial service information, GE Healthcare, et cetera. So a lot of companies are having success with that. I just also want to make a call out to Mechanical Turk. I don't know, how many people have ever heard of Mechanical Turk? Oh, okay, we got some hands in the room. That's excellent. It's actually one of our oldest services. It's been around for more than 10 years, like 12 years now. And actually, imagine you can crowdsource an activity. And that activity in data science usually is labeling data. Now, if you're a data scientist, when I say label data, you start feeling a headache coming on, because it's like that's the no-brainer, but a lot of effort part of machine learning. And so the idea is if you can outsource that and you can crowdsource that data to have that labeled for you, suddenly you can go from having only 100 data instances to tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands. So it helps solve a big problem in data science, which is labeling data. Now, if we look at the next layer up from that, this is if you have no background in machine learning, you don't want to have a background in machine learning, you don't care about machine learning, you just want to get some results. And that's what we talk about with our application services layer. So if we look at the vision part of that, we see recognition. This is a premier software, a solution that we offer. It's been almost 2 years now that we've been offering it for doing facial analysis, for doing facial matching detection, object and scene detection, so you could automatically tag a photo. You could identify an age of the person. You could identify demographics of that person. You can identify sentiment of that person's face. So you have a lot of power within that. You also have unsafe image detection. So imagine if you're offering to your users the ability to upload content, and you may right now have to check every photo to make sure that photo is okay. You can actually offload that to recognition. You could send that photo to recognition and say, is this acceptable content? And it will give you back a set of tags. All of this is API driven. Everything we're going to talk about is API driven. So you call an API, and you get back a JSON graph that tells you exactly what it saw within that image or whatever it saw inside the text. So you also see celebrity recognition and text and image. So you can imagine text and image comes up in companies like SmugMug and Pinterest. Those are major customers of our service for doing text and image. So it does a great job of license plate identification and different font styles that can handle all of that. So how do we apply that to video? There's some challenges when you try to go from a still image analysis to a video image analysis. So oftentimes, if you're just using still image capability like the original recognition, you would just get the information about an image. So maybe I have the information of someone holding a cup, and I have the information of the cup being here, but I don't understand that there's a context, which is that the person's drinking. And that part, that motion context gets lost. And it's always slow and error-prone to try to identify against a data set that's a video feed, and very expensive overall. What people have found is this is a really challenging problem. So we actually launched then the previous reInvent about 9 months ago, our annual conference where we do a lot of product launches. We launched recognition video. So the idea was to be able to detect faces inside video streams. So you have a video stream, and it's able to identify the individuals inside that video stream. It's able to detect the objects just like it does with the photos. And it can do content moderation to identify if there's anything wrong with the photos or the image. And then celebrity recognition as well. So all those capabilities, you'd be able to do tracking of individuals. That capability is inside of recognition. And now, if we think about the services, that's our computer vision story. So if you think about the services for voice and language, we actually can start with Poly. And Poly is actually a service for text-to-speech. And it supports 52 different voices across 25 different languages. Those languages include Korean, Japanese, many of the European languages, so Spanish, German, French, Italian, even Icelandic. So you have actually a very broad set of languages that are supported, as well as voices inside that to create a natural sounding voice based on text. And so you have lip syncing potential. So we actually have a product called Sumerian, but you could lip sync. You have the annotation where you could lip sync text to the person's voice, the visemes of the mouth formation. So you match it. And you can actually change the volume, not the volume, but the timbre. You can change all these different aspects of the voice itself. And you have custom vocabulary support if there's need for additional words that are outside the vocabulary. And it's available today. It's available in 14 different regions. So what you do is you actually call the API, you give it the text you want, you tell it the language that you prefer, the particular voice, and then you'll get back an MP3 file that you can actually play or you can stream it directly to the users. So we also offer Transcribe, which is the opposite problem, which is taking voice and then turning it into text. And so we support both regular and telephony video, audio. So if you dealt with call centers, you know often the call quality is very low. It's 8 kilohertz level. So the audio is very bad. But it actually is built around that concept of taking very poor quality audio and generating text. It has support for our object storage, which is S3. It has timestamps. So imagine it does the translation, not the translation, but the transcription, and it will tell you exactly what time did I hear what word. So I can actually create a word cloud from that to tell you what were the major topics. I could tell you when those topics occurred, so you could actually fast forward to see only the section that you're interested in. And it has support for things like punctuation, which are very difficult because we don't actually say question mark. So it has to infer that the aspects of grammar and recognizes multiple speakers. That's actually already launched, so it has the ability and support where it hears a dialogue between more than one person, so between 2 or 3. You can actually identify those individual voices. And custom dictionaries, again, supported. And a lot of use cases for that, of course, call centers, subtitling on the video, broadcast closed captions, transcribing meetings is a very common case as well that we're seeing from customers. So there's also a translate product. So we actually support 24 different language pairs today. So we support things like Chinese simplified, Chinese traditional, Japanese, to be able to translate those to other languages such as Arabic, Spanish, English, obviously, German, several others, but 24 total language pairs. And so you pay only for, again, as much text as you're processing. And it's a neural translation, so it's much more accurate, and you can basically test it yourself. So you can connect to the API, you can pass it the data and tell it what is the target language that you're identifying, and it'll actually automatically detect the source language. So what if you want to understand more about the text? We talked about translating text, we talked about text to speech, speech to text. How do you get more information? How do you mine that text for data? And of course, when you want to do sentiment analysis and aspects like that, that's obviously a big concern. So Comprehend offers you the ability to do that. So you pass it the text, and you can identify sentiment. You can identify what are the key entities, what are the proper nouns that are being described in this text. What are the key phrases? What are things that probably are very important to this particular text? And what language was it spoken in or written in? And it'll actually identify also topics. And so the first example here is if you actually gave it just some simple text, we see that it identifies in blue what are the proper nouns, the things that are names for objects or entities. And we see Amazon.com and Seattle, Washington, and all of that are identified as named entities. Key phrases, it tries to identify what does it think is meaningful in here. And so it sees things in yellow like our customers and books and blenders. And it identifies a sentiment. It says positive. It will actually give you either positive, negative, mixed, or neutral. And so it'll give you the probability of each one of those sentiments. So sometimes it may be mixed. And so you have the ability to do all that topic modeling as well. So you can actually do an unsupervised learning where you specify the number of topics, you give it a corpus of text, and it will actually try to sort all of the documents into classifications up to the number that you've specified. So it's another option that's available to customers where you don't need to understand machine learning. You just tell it the number of topics you want, you point it to the document source, and it will sort those out. So maybe it could be looking, in our case, we had Washington Post adopted this, so that they would be able to sort items or articles into topics. So when you do that, then the idea is that if I'm a user, I'm browsing the website, it seems like 80% of the time I'm looking at sports articles. So of course, it's already identified and marked that as a particular topic type. It'll just forward me into those topics. Now, I gave an example. It's very easy to label. I said sports. I think any human being in here can look at an article and say, that's a sports article, or that's a government publication. But it's not so easy for machines. And the idea is that you can have the machines detect essentially what are the latent topics that are binding these different documents together. And so sometimes we can't even put a name to it. We could identify, but we can't even name it. So the idea is that you can automatically be sorting your topics through this method if you have a lot of content. And of course, a lot of use cases for that. We have the idea of voice of customer. So you imagine you have a Twitter feed. You want to analyze that for sentiment. You could be identifying, suddenly did our sentiment start dropping or become more negative? And what's the reason for that? So that you can automate some of the piece and then put a human in the loop to deal with the actual outcome. So you alert the proper people, and then they can actually go and monitor and detect, is there something specific that you need to do with that? And semantic search is a great use case, and knowledge management and discovery. So I've given you all these different tools, and so you're like, okay, this is all a bunch of, whatever, so I can't, what's the product? The product is whatever you build. That's the key. The idea is that you look at your particular use case. It may be you're in an industry like call center, maybe you're doing software development, whatever it is, but these are tools that you can put together as blocks to create the overall solution. So for instance, you could take things like our Kinesis streaming and take a Twitter stream, feed it into Kinesis, so it now is stored in the cloud. You can do translate on that. So imagine you're dealing with customer sentiment that's in Japan. You can analyze that text. You can actually process it through Comprehend as English Comprehend capability to identify what was the sentiment, what's happening inside this article. And then you could report it to a dashboard using something like QuickSight. These pieces come together to create your unique solution, your bespoke solution. So we also have Amazon Lex. You saw earlier they were talking about FPT with the ability to speak to the microphone, the automated speech recognition. We have a capability with Alexa where you can build a skill into it. But let's say you don't have a device, or you want to use a website, or you want to do something different. It has to be completely custom, and you're not assuming a device on the case of the user. That's where you could use a tool like Lex. And Lex is powered by the same technology that runs Alexa. So the same natural language understanding and automated speech recognition capability that you typically would have is available in Lex. So you can build your own chatbot. You can automate your call center. I mentioned earlier about the National Health Service. They were using Amazon Lex in order to be able to offload many of their phone calls to a voice chatbot. So the idea is automating those pieces. It's all available to you inside of Lex. It allows you to create a multi-turn interface. You identify intents. It has many different capabilities, but it's essentially an out-of-the-box chatbot solution. And you can use that in cases like customer chatbots, application bots, enterprise production, all of these different cases. You have many different choices. And of course, we're standing here today at the good grace of FPT hosting this event. We're so grateful to be brought on to discuss the different things that we've seen customers doing on AI and ML. But I definitely want to highlight that partners are a big part of our success. And they are the ones that drive the solutions and help us to enable those customers. So, of course, we have on the left consulting partners, people that you can call if you feel like you need help with AWS platform. Those people are available for the systems integration, for all the different activities, managed services as well, doing workshops. FPT is a big part of that. But even on the other side, technology partners, basically they identify solutions, software solutions, often out-of-the-box things or on our marketplace. Those technology partners, FPT is one of those as well. And they've been a great partner. They were the first ones native in the region to be a managed service partner and a migration competency, part of our migration competency program. And we're really proud to have them on with us, working with us. And we're so glad that we were invited today to talk about it. I also want to give a shout out. You guys probably already saw this slide, but certainly FPT has their own solutions around AI. And again, we don't know the future. I don't think we know the future. I heard from Jeff Bezos, according to published quotes, I don't talk with him. He said that I don't know what the future looks like, but I do know a couple of things that won't change. One is customers are never going to say, can I pay more for that? And they're never going to say, I don't want it that fast. So you can imagine that divinely discerning customer, that customer needing more and more every day, and they will continue to challenge us. You can go and build solutions. You can take platforms like AWS and deliver better solutions than we're even delivering today, and I encourage you to do so. And so that's what continues with innovation. We are day one. Things continue to change and evolve, and we will continue to be there to help you to do that. So we have ML Solutions Lab. If you guys are currently exploring different things that you want to do with machine learning and you have no background whatsoever, we actually have, obviously, a lot of machine learning experts who are available, and we engage from 1 to 6 weeks with customers, and we'll actually help them to ramp up their capabilities. We don't want to do it for you. We want you to learn how to do it, and that's the key to those engagements. So we do a lot of whiteboard teaching, brainstorming around your idea, but the idea is at the end of it that we want you to be able to successfully run your own machine learning practice internally. And customers that have went down that path, NFL I mentioned earlier, they use that. Cathay Pacific is also a customer, has used our ML Solutions Lab successfully, and Moody's and others. So definitely encourage you guys to look at that, and please reach out to us. And that's the web address, and that's me, and I really appreciate your time, and come earn.